Shabbat Shalom, everyone. First of all, apologies for the slightly late start. The scroll had not been read from for approximately a month, so it took me a while to actually roll it and find the correct place to read for this week. So that's the delay. We'll be beginning with Shabbat morning service number 2 on page 112. 112.
Which begins with Martovu.
Like our services.
נתתי לך, אדוני את רצון, אלוהים ברוב חסדך, אלוהים ברוב חסדך, ענני באמת ישך.
Eternal God, a mystery surrounds my life. What came before it and what lies beyond it are shrouded in darkness. But in the darkness is your presence, and in the mystery, your love. No mind can grasp the splendor of your being. No tongue express the majesty of your works. Yet there are times when we sense reality that is far beyond our mortal sight. May this Sabbath be such a time for us. Help us to hear your voice, to find your image in our souls, and to be at peace. And on page 113, we sing Elohai Neshama, as we give thanks that, well, as we acknowledge that our souls are pure and are kind of pleased that we've got it back this morning.
We'll use a chant composed by Rabbi Shefa Gold. The idea of a chant is we try to get in the mood. So if you don't know the words, please just hum something that you think fits. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tehorahi. Elohai neshama
We praise you, O God, in whose hands are the souls of all the living and the spirits of all flesh. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch Hu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, ha'mechulal b'fi amo, משובח ומפואר בלשון חסידיו ויעבדיו, בשבחות וזמירות נגדל לך ונמליכך, מלכנו יחיד חי העולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מחולל בתשבחות. We continue in the middle of page 114. You are allowed to read, I believe. Are we allowed to read behind our masks?
Oh, yes.
I thought so. So we'll read Psalm 19 responsively. The heavens declare the glory of God.
The sky proclaims God's handiwork.
Day into day utters speech.
Night teaches knowledge.
Yet there is no speech. There are no words.
Not a sound within is heard.
And still their call goes out to all the earth.
And their message to the end of the world.
God's teaching is perfect.
Reviving the soul.
God's word is unfailing.
Making wise the simple.
God's precepts are right.
Delighting the mind.
God's commandments are clear.
Enlightening the eye.
God's doctrine is pure.
Enduring forever.
God's guidance is true.
And altogether just.
They are more to be desired than gold, than any amount of fine gold.
Sweeter than honey to nothing.
Your servant pays heed to them.
For all keeping them much depends.
Who is aware of errors?
Cleanse me therefore of unconscious sins.
Hold back your servant also from willful sins.
Let them not control me.
Then I shall be blameless.
And innocent of grave transgression.
May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. We're going to continue on page 135 as we rise for Yishtabach. I'll give you a chance to get there. And we rise on page 135 for Yishtabach. Yishtabach Shemcha La'ad Malkeinu, Ha'el HaMelech HaKadol VeHaKadosh V'Shamayim U'V'Aretz. Ki Lacha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu V'Elohei Avotenu. Shiru Shvacha Halel V'Zimra Barachot V'Chodoot Me'ata V'Ad Olam. Baruch Atah Adonai Habocher B'Shirei Zimra.
La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Baruch Hu et Adonai
Resume our seats. This first paragraph after the Baruch Hu talks about light and dark, the sort of day-by-day creation, the continual cycle of the day. And so we're going to sing the song that I quite like, which is Roll Into Night, Roll Into Day. And it also has some of the Hebrew bits in it as well.
It starts with a bit of English. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. And then it uses the first paragraph from the Hebrew. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Melech haolam, Yotzei or u'orei choshech, Osei shalom, borei et hakol. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night. Roll into dark, roll into light. Night becomes day, day turns to night.
And of course the day turns again to light, and we conclude by saying, Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer HaMeorot. We praise you, O God, creator of light. Let's continue reading together. Right, you can see that I can't see today. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching. Make us faithful to your commandments and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you. and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love, you have called your people Israel to serve you. And we rise for the Shema, in the middle of page 137.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. 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 Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'vitecha u'vlechtecha v'derech u'shokbecha u'kumecha u'kshatam le'ot al yadecha v'hayu le'totafot be'eninecha u'ktavtam al mezuzot be'techa u'visharecha. Can we resume our seats?
למען תזכרו, עשיתם את כל מצוותיי, הייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני Adonai Elohim.
We continue together. Good and beautiful and true, sound, established, and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
But I doubt they sang it that high. So.
שירה חדשה שבכל גאולים, לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם, הודו והמליכו ואמרו.
Adonai, So Israel, Kumar Ezrat Israel, Goleinu, Adonai Tzvaot Shemo, Kadosh Israel, Baruch atah Adonai, God Israel, God Israel, Israel.
We rise on page 140 for the Tefillah, sometimes called the Amidah, standing prayer.
Adonai, Sefetai Tiftach, Ufi Agit Tehillah. Eternal God, open my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imachot, U'Mevi Gula Livnei V'neihem, Lema'an Shemo B'Yahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Bezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, B'chayei Metim Atah, Rav Lehoshia, Mashiv Haruach U'Morid HaGeshem, Mazriach HaShemesh U'Morid HaTal.
Mechalchel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechayim Eitim B'Rachamim Rabim, Somek Noflim V'Rofei Holim, U'Matir Asurim, U'Mekayim Emunato L'Shenei Afa, Mi Hamocha V'Al Gevurot, U'Mido Melach, Melech Meimit U'Mechaye, U'Matzmiach Yeshua.
B'nei Amanata L'Chachayot Meitim, Baruch atah Adonai, B'chayei HaMeitim.
Nekadesh et Shemcha ba'olam, Shem Shema Kishimo Tobishmei Marom, Kakatu Ayad Nevi'echa, Ayad Nevi'echa, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, Malach haaretz, Kevodo.
Kevodo Malei Olam.
Baruch Hod Adonai Mimchomo.
Mimkomachom Malkeinu Tofia, V'timloch Aleinu, Ki Mechakim Anachnu Lach.
Yimloch Adonai Leolam, Elohai Zion, Ado Ado, Hallelujah. Ado Ado, Ado Ado, Ado Ado, Nagigar Lecha, Ado Ado, Ado Ado, Ado Ado, Nagigar Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Krusharka, Krusharka, Nakdish, Ulenetzach netzach netzachim, ulenetzach netzachim, kedushatcha nakdish, l'doado, doado, doado, nagid gad lecha, l'doado, 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 nagid gad lecha, l'shivcha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush le'olam va'ed, l'shivcha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. We can resume our seats. And we continue together on the bottom of page 142. You inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. When upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good.
Yismachu b'malchutecha, Yismachu b'malchutecha, Shomrei Shabbat v'korei onek, Amakatshe shavi, Kulam yispo yitangu mituvecha, V'hashvi, Ratzita bo V'kidashto, Chemdat yamim, Oto karatka, Zechel Amase Bereshit.
We're chanting.
Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Ritzei b'mnukatenu, Kadshenu b'mitzvotecha, v'tein helchenu b'shuatecha, Sabeinu mituvecha, v'samchenu b'shuatecha, v'tahel lebeinu, l'avdecha, be'emet. V'hanchilenu Adonai Eloheinu, v'ahava u'ratzon, Shabbat kodshecha, Vayanuchu v'Yisrael, Mekadeshei Shemecha.
Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Say Adonai Eloheinu, V'Amecha Yisrael, O David
Continue together in the middle of page 144. We give thanks that you, Eternal One, are our God, as you were the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank and praise you for our lives, which are in your hand, for our souls, which are in your keeping, for the signs of your presence we encounter every day, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. We praise you, O God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due.
Sim shalom tova ubracha, sim shalom tova ubracha, kein v'chesed v'rachamim. Sim shalom tova ubracha, sim shalom tova ubracha, kein v'chesed v'rachamim. Aleinu elcha Israel amecha. Sim shalom. Aleinu elcha Yoshe tevel. Sim shalom. Sim shalom tova ubracha. Sim shalom tova ubracha. Ein v'chesed v'rachamim.
Baruch atah Adonai, Oseh HaShalom. We praise you, O God, the source of peace. We take a few moments now for our own thoughts and silent prayers.
Oseh shalom bimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al chol Yisrael, ve'al chol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al chol Israel, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Israel. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel.
We'll continue now with our Torah service on page 490. And I think I'm just going to leave Vince and I up here on the bema. I think it's just, looking at the rising numbers and the high numbers of infection and knowing that, quite frankly, I go out a lot, and although I do lateral flow test before I come out, there's some of you who might not want to be really all that close to me. So just to keep everybody safe, I think Vince and I will do this on our own. So we are on page 490. So although it says, assemble the people, I'm afraid today we're not going to. Hopefully in a few more weeks things will have settled down a bit, and I'll be much happier to have a load of people up here on the bima with me. And they might be happier to be up here with me as well. Hachel et ha'am, assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the strangers in your cities, to hear and learn to revere the Eternal One, your God, and observe faithfully all the precepts of this Torah. And that their children who do not yet know it hear, that they too may learn to revere the Eternal One, your God. Please rise as we open the ark. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Adonai Kadosh Shemo.
Gadlu Adonai Ti, Oneromema Shemo Yachdav.
Adonai Agdol Tiferet V'Hanetzach V'Hapod B'Kol Hashamayim U'Haaretz B'Kol Hashamayim U'Haaretz Adonai HaMamlecha V'Hanitnaseh L'Chol Erod.
Okay, so the scroll's sitting down, so that means you can sit down as well. And we are going to be reading today from Exodus. The parasha is Bo, and it's Exodus chapter 10, and I'll be reading verses 1 through 7. Yes, 1 through 7. So, yeah. So I'm going to call Vince up since he's already here. Yamod.
Come on.
Sorry. Yamod David ben Avraham v'Sarah al HaTorah.
Baruch hu et Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher b'cha banu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Sorry, I'm moving this as close to this light because I've just noticed the reason I can't see is that we have a burnt out bulb up there. I'm so sorry. Amen. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, bo el Paro, ki ani hikvadati et libo, viet lev avadav, lema'an shiti ototai, אלה בקרבו, ולמען תספר באוזני בנך ובן בנך, את אשר התעללתי במצרים, ואת עטותי אשר שמתי בם, וידעתם כי אני אדוני. ויבוא משה ואחרון אל פרעה, ויאמרו אליו, כה אמר אדוני אלוהי העברים, עד מתי מאנת לענות מפני שלח עמי ויעבדוני, כי אם מאין אתה לשלח את עמי, הנני הנני מביא מחר הרבה בגבולך, וכיסה את עין הארץ, ולא יוכל לראות את הארץ. ואכל את יתר התפילת הנשארת לכם מן הברד, ואכל את כל העץ הצמח לכם מן השדה, ומלאו ביתך ובתי כל עבדיך ובתי כל מצרים, אשר לא ראו אבותיך ואבות אבותיך מיום הייתם על האדמה עד היום הזה. ויפן ויוצא מעם פרעה, ויאמרו עבדי פרעה אליו, עד מתי יהיה זה לנו למוקש שלח את האנשים ויעבדו את אדוני אלוהיכם, הטרם תדע כי עבדי מצרים.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Actually, do you want to read that?
Okay.
The English bit? I'll let you read that.
Then the Eternal One said to Moses, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his courtiers, in order that I may display these my signs among them, and that you may recount in the hearing of your child and of your child's child how I made a mockery of the Egyptians, and how I displayed my signs among them, in order that you may know that I am the Eternal One. So Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said to him, thus says the Eternal One, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may worship me. For if you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow I will bring locusts on your territory. They shall cover the surface of the land, so that no one will be able to see the land. They shall devour the surviving remnant that was left to you after the hail, and they shall eat away all your trees that grow in the field. Moreover, they shall fill your palaces and the houses of all your courtiers and of all the Egyptians, something that neither your fathers nor your fathers' fathers have seen from the day they appeared on earth to this day. With that, he turned and left Pharaoh's presence. Pharaoh's courtiers said to him, "How long shall this one be a snare to us? Let the men go to worship the Eternal One, their God. Are you not yet aware that Egypt is lost?"
That's it.
Hypo?
Yeah.
I'm going to... Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'pishtachavu v'hakosho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'pishtachavu v'hakosho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu.
Stand up. You can stand up. So we rise for the community prayers on page 493. Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe. Let's say these together. Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity. May the one who blessed our ancestors, let's continue together, bless all our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel who enter synagogues to pray and to give aid to those in need. May the Holy One to whom all praise is due hear their prayers and help them to fulfill their aspirations for good. Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbors, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. Yahalelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizgav shemo levado. This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel in time to come, says the Eternal One. I will put my teaching within them and engrave it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer shall anyone need to teach a friend or a neighbor to know me, for they all shall know me, young and old alike.
Ashirenu Adonai Elecha V'nashua Kadesh Yameinu B'Kedem Kadesh Yameinu B'Kedem.
We can resume our seats. So in this parasha, we really have the final act, as it were, leading up to the Exodus. We're presented with the last three plagues: the locusts, darkness, and finally, death of the firstborn. There are three requests to leave, and each request is met with allowing a bit more of what has been asked for. First, after the locusts, Pharaoh says, well, the men could be allowed to go, but not their families. After the darkness, Moses is told, fine, take your families, but leave your flocks and herds. And with the death of the firstborn, they are finally told to go. I was struck by the phrase, go to Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart and the hearts of his courtiers, so that I may display my signs among them. This is a rather troubling phrase, I think, which Resh Lakish, one of the sages of the Talmud, suggests means that after someone is warned a number of times, God gives up and hardens the person's heart. Perhaps it's more a case of having been given a number of chances to change his mind. Pharaoh finds it impossible to change. And despite what it says in Torah, that the courtiers' hearts have been hardened, it appears that even Pharaoh's courtiers at this point see the danger. And in another interesting phrase, tell Pharaoh to let the Israelites go, but to no avail. Obviously, Pharaoh is so bent on having his way, he won't listen to those meant to advise him. Not a very good example of leadership. He seems to care more about how he's perceived than what happens in the end to the people, to his people, those whom he should not just be leading, but in reality be also serving. Now, I'd like to take a look at these plagues. Two of these, locusts and darkness, I find particularly interesting, but for two very different reasons. In the first case, the locusts, this is just a bit of Salt Lake City social history. Salt Lake City is where I'm from. It's my birthplace. And it has as one of its founding stories the existence of a plague of grasshoppers which descended upon the crops of the earliest settlers. So the settlers had arrived in 1847. That is the white settlers. Of course, it was well settled by Native Americans before then. But 1847. And then, of course, the first thing they did, obviously, was begin to plant crops. And the crops started to come up in 1848. And the story goes that in 1848, a plague of grasshoppers descended upon Salt Lake City and threatened to destroy all those crops, those new crops. And they were eaten by it's related as a miracle, that it's miraculous arrival of gulls which devoured all of the crickets. Consequently, the California gull is actually the state bird of Utah. Now, I think that their presence, the presence of gulls in Utah is probably more due, and especially in the Salt Lake area, to the existence of the Great Salt Lake and its numerous crustacea that inhabit it, which of course are great food for the seagulls. So obviously they would have been there, and also they're not really seagulls, gulls. It's a misnomer. Gulls go anywhere there's water. They hang around lakes as well. And since Utah has about 500 and some of those, I guess it's not too surprising that there were gulls in Utah. But there is in Salt Lake City, should you ever go there, a big monument right in the center of town to the seagulls that saved the city in 1848. So that's just a little bit of, I think, fun social history that I thought was worth sharing with you. But I think the darkness, looking at the plague of darkness, it's a much more serious thing. Darkness, unlike locusts, is not just a simple physical thing. In this instance, in Torah, it's the absence of physical light, which prevents the Egyptians from seeing and moving about, not only outside their houses, but inside their houses. And I think sometimes that it's no coincidence that we actually read this time of year, because though not as complete as the darkness of Egypt, we're still experiencing more actual darkness due to these short days, although they are beginning to lengthen a bit. And the days here, for me, are altogether much dimmer than what I was used to before moving here. In Salt Lake, even after a snowstorm, you can wake up to a foot of snow and a big shining sun. So I've struggled in the 30-odd years I've been here in the winter. In fact, I think most Januaries I just as soon hibernate. I wish I were a bear, and I just like to pull myself inside and give it up for the month. So I think I often refer to myself as solar powered, and I know that I need to force myself to get out this time of year because it would just be all too easy. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. Increased physical darkness due to shorter days and less sun certainly brings on for many something called seasonal affective disorder. And this leads us to a more metaphorical idea of darkness, that feeling of being down or even of actual depression. And I suppose this is also partly why this particular parashah, whenever it occurs, is designated as Mental Health Awareness Shabbat. I think this year, along with the short days, again, we've got the issue and the stress of how to deal with COVID and the worry of, at least in my case and possibly others of you, an increasing number of ill friends. I think for about a year, I hardly knew anyone that was catching COVID. And suddenly within, I'd say, the last 3 weeks or so, it's been friend after friend after friend after friend. My Facebook feed has been loads of positive tests. And while thankfully, my friends believe in vaccination, and so their cases have been fairly light, except for one who's just been diagnosed with long COVID. And hopefully it won't last too long for him, but that's been a problem. He did miss a second week of work and is still feeling really quite poorly and quite breathless. And breathless is not a good situation for someone who appears on stage to be in. If you can't sing and you can't talk, it's a bit of a problem. I'm fed up with the situation I can't do much about, and I suspect I may not be the only one. And perhaps rather laughably, I appear to have developed an allergy to the lateral flow tests that we have been using. I was fine with the first lot that we had, but the ones we got a couple of weeks ago have left me with a sore throat and a very raw nose. So I'm fine physically if I don't go out and don't test, but not so fine emotionally if I just stay home. But then, if I do go out, which means that I have to test, then I don't feel very well because I've got this constant sore throat and this constant sort of nosebleeds and everything. So it's my conundrum for this year. What can I say? There's nothing for it, but I guess I make my choice, and my choice currently is to go out and suffer with the sore throat, because I know I'm not really going to give it to anything to anybody as long as I'm still seeing that single red line on my lateral flow test. But I know that others are struggling far more than I am. One of my friends has had 2 friends commit suicide within the last month. And I just learned today of the suicide of a young trans woman in Brighton. So clearly, darkness and different sorts of darkness, I think sometimes one can lead to the other, and it's a difficult time of year for a lot of people. And I find it interesting that the authors of our current Siddur developed the theme of community for this parashah. Now, I think at first glance there's an obvious link arising from the demand of the Israelites to leave Egypt with their entire families and the whole community to go. But the existence of a community and being part of one is also helpful with the struggle with darkness. We do better if we're with people. We do better if we have friends to talk to. And we do better if we listen to other people. Statistics show that those who sort of volunteer and support other people actually feel better themselves than those who don't. And as the theme develops in our Siddur, I think this idea becomes even more prominent. So I'd just like to read a little bit of that theme. It's on page 216, if you want to have a look in your Siddurs as well, because it's there. Strange is our situation here upon earth. Each of us comes for a short visit, not knowing why, yet sometimes seeming to divine a purpose. From the standpoint of daily life, however, there is one thing we do know, that we are here for the sake of others, above all for those on whose smile and well-being our own happiness depends, and also for the countless unknown souls with whose fate we are connected by a bond of sympathy. Many times a day I realize how much my own outer and inner life is built upon the labors of others, both living and dead, and how earnestly I must exert myself in order to give in return as much as I have received and still receiving. Goes on to say, men and women are naturally social beings who, by virtue of their nature, seek to form communities. The structure of modern society affects us in 2 ways simultaneously. We become more independent, self-reliant, and critical, but we also become more isolated, alone, and afraid. The modern emphasis on the individual has been a great advance, but we pay a heavy price for our individuality if we forget our need for community, and much of our feeling of alienation stems from that amnesia. For it is in relation with others that we discover ourselves, and in making common cause with a group larger than ourselves and our immediate family, that we find meaning, purpose, and happiness. Let us then strive to strengthen our sense of community with our own people, the house of Israel, and with the larger human family. Renew my vision, O God. Give meaning to my life and substance to my hopes. Help me understand those about me and fill me with the desire to serve them. Let me remember that I depend on them as they depend on me. Quicken my heart and hand to lift them up, and teach me to make my words of prayer fruitful by deeds of loving kindness. And this theme concludes with Im Einani Li Mili, and we'll return to that as our concluding song today. So we turn now to our concluding prayers, and we will turn to page 213 as we sing Rebecca's version of "And Then." So page 213, as we look forward to that time in the future when people do work together, do help each other, support each other, and build that better world for which our people have always longed.
And then all that's divided us will merge, and then compassion will be wedded to power, and then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind, and then men and women will be gentle, and then both women and men will be strong, and then no person will be subject to another's will. And then all will be rich and free and varied, and then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many. And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance, and then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old, and then all will nourish the young, and then all will cherish life's creatures, and then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth, and then everywhere will be called Eden once again.
Come now to the part of our service where we think of those who are no longer with us, those with whom we shared Shabbats and festivals and our joys and sorrows. The growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. Even when they are gone, the departed are with us. They inspire us to live as in their higher moments they themselves sought to live. We remember them now. They remain in our hearts. They are a continual blessing. And this Shabbat, we remember Rosie Berndt, the grandmother of Tina Higgins, Sophie Plachta, the mother of Pamela DeCaria Silver, Robert McMillan, the husband of Irene McMillan, and Adrian McMillan, the son of Irene McMillan, Wynne Levine, mother of Paul Levine, and Jimmy Abramson, the brother of Judy Parrish. Are there any other names?
Yes, Sarah would like us to mention a family connection, Harvey Parker, who's the chap who was found drowned in the River Thames this week, and also her colleague's husband, Graham Fox, who died yesterday.
Thank you. So for those whom we have named, for all those whose names we hold in our hearts, and for those for whom there is no one left to say Kaddish, we say together on page 524 as we rise. V'yit gadal, v'yit kadash, shemei rabbah, v'alma divrach hirutei, v'amlich malchutei, v'chayechon, v'yomechon, v'chayei rechol beit Israel, bagala v'zman kariv, v'imru, amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevorach, le'olam l'almei omaya. Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitba'ar, v'yitromam, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitalei, v'yitalal, shmei dekudesha, b'richu. Le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata, tishbachata v'nechemata, da'aniran v'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehi shalom rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol b'nei Adam v'imru. Amen. We can resume our seats, and we are going to conclude with Im Einani Li Mili.
I wonder whether Craig's got any announcements.
Does Craig have any announcements? Do you have any announcements before I move too swiftly on?
Yes, actually. Shall I?
We will step well away. Leave you to.
Yes, because something that was too late for the weekly bulletin this week, but just say it is our movement, Liberal Judaism's 120th anniversary this year, and they are planning a number of events. One of those is for an open house Shabbat every week of the year, and two of them will be at KLS as a chance for us to, we are broadcasting online at the moment, but we're inviting people to join us from the rest of the movement and beyond. So there'll be more details of that coming during the year. But also next week begins a series of lectures that Liberal Judaism are putting on. And the next week is, I think it's Wednesday. It's online. Wednesdays is on the subject of John Rayner. It's a retrospective of him. And there's weekly sessions after that, so worth looking out and going along if you can. Okay.
Thank you.
The final song, Imein Ani Li Mili, is in Hebrew, but let me read you a translation. It comes originally from the collection of sayings called Pirkei Avot. Here we go. If I'm not for myself, who would be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, when? And it continues, in every generation, we must look upon ourselves as if we personally had been rescued from Egypt.
Ein ani li mili, וכשאני לעצמי מעני, ואם לא עכשיו אימתי, אימתי. אם אין אני לי מילי, וכשאני לעצמי מעני, ואם לא עכשיו אימתי, בכל דור ודור חי אדם לראות את עצמו כאילו הוא יצא ממצרים. אם אין אני לי מילי וכשאני לעצמי מעני ואם לא עכשיו
By way of concluding benediction, may the source of strength who blessed the ones before us help us to find the courage always to make our lives a blessing. And let us say, Amen. And let us go in for Kiddush, which I believe is in the NFJ Hall.